It is currently seen that everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression, as seen through the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. But in an increasingly globalized world, there needs to be limits on the right to freedom of opinion and expression. There has been a sharp increase in worldwide migration since the right was introduced in 1948. This has had a significant impact on the social transformation of regions around the world, with worldwide migration continually rising and an increase in volume and diversity around the world. The significance of this right has become subject to scrutiny over its relevance in today's increasingly globalized world. Globalization has not only resulted in a flow of people, but also in a flow of different cultures, religions, and ways of life. For us to work towards living peacefully in this multi-diverse world, a line between free speech and hate speech needs to be defined so that reasonable limits to freedom of opinion expression can be put in place. Whilst free speech is undoubtedly important, it should in no way entail harm to others. The relationship between free speech, extremism, and tolerance is a complex one. Hate speech can be defined as abusive or threatening speech or writing that expresses prejudice against a person or particular group, especially on the basis of race, religion, or sexual orientation. The digital age has transformed the public sphere by allowing thoughts and opinions to be shared much more freely, anonymously, and without consequence worldwide. In the United States, digitally, the right to free speech is protected and further strengthened under the Communications Decency Act, establishing an internet which allows social media companies exemption from legal liability for speech from users. This has been a vital reason why social media platforms have rarely been held accountable for any offensive, hateful, or problematic speech. In 2012, an anti-Islamic video titled "Innocence of Muslims" was posted on YouTube. Its release ignited violent demonstrations and protests, which resulted in around 50 deaths and hundreds of injuries worldwide. The film was described as a targeted attack which aimed to exploit the predispositions of our media system. Google was criticised for allowing the film online access despite its hate-filled propaganda, giving light to the ubiquity of internet communications and the danger of unfettered freedom it offers its users. The global nature of the internet makes regulating hate speech difficult. Banks identifies the internet as the new frontier for the spread of hate, as large numbers can easily be reached with little consequence, as it is out of the traditional realms of law enforcement. Although many states have attempted to regulate hate speech on the internet through national law, the multi-jurisdictionality of the internet has provided obstacles. The United States makes the regulation of hate speech difficult, as many efforts to regulate are undermined by their commitment to the First Amendment and free speech. The majority of hate sites have a US origin, and with the extensive capacity and accessibility of the internet, the spread is unbeatable. The safety net of the US's First Amendment makes it a safe haven for hate speech and allows the spread of it via the internet to avoid regulation. Although freedom of opinion and expression is declared as a human right, there are many countries where the fight for freedom is still an ongoing battle. In 2017, Turkey was reported as having the highest number of imprisoned journalists for the second year in a row, whilst IYY, a contemporary artist and activist from China, has experienced imprisonment and heavy repression from the state for his works. So whilst it is important to place limitations around free speech in order to minimize the damage of hate speech, it is also important to recognize the inequalities surrounding free speech around the world and work towards creating an equal society as global citizens. But in order to foster good relations in this increasingly globalized world, there must be a limit put on the spread of hate speech, as it does nothing but divide us as global citizens. Restrictive laws and speech should be enacted when racist and hateful expression and opinions are used as a motive to inflict significant harm to individuals or excite extreme hatred and violence. Placing boundaries on freedom of speech is no easy feat. It must be approached on an individual, national, and international level in order to be successful. Speech that incites violence or discrimination must be restricted. Hate speech must be clearly defined so that it can be restricted through legislation. Along with the legislative approach, core issues around hate speech and freedom of speech need addressing. For example, educators can help prevent the normalization of hate speech through teaching and education on the matter. In conclusion, whilst there is certainly importance in having free speech, and everyone should have access to it, in an increasingly globalized world, there is need for limits to be put in place to prevent the damage that follows acts of hate speech. But it can be acknowledged that navigating a way in which to enact these limits is something that will be an increasingly complex and difficult task to do.